actually in Gilpin. We are a small 10.5-acre farm, and we specialize in permaculture as well as, you know, just raising small animals. We have everything from cows, horses, chickens, turkeys. We have sheep, goats, pigs, basically Old MacDonald's farm. If it lives on a farm, we have it. We specialize in something called permaculture. Have you guys ever heard the word permaculture before? Yeah? Okay, some of you haven't, so I'm going to go ahead and tell you what permaculture is. The definition of permaculture is the development of agricultural ecosystems intended to be self-sustaining and self-sufficient, okay? So that means each part of this system is able to support one another, or for the most part, able to support one another. Nothing goes to waste, and absolutely everything has a purpose. It can be repurposed to use for something else, okay? We have a vast program in place that includes everything on our farm, from the animals to the gardens, to animal feed and soil nutrition, even clearing and health of our forest, and something called a silvopasture. Do you guys know what silvopastures are? A silvopasture is an area of woodland that you have cleared the underbrush from, and that you've cleared out some of the smaller straggling trees. That enables the bigger trees to grow fuller, and that allows the sunlight to come down and provide a nice grass that the animals can graze on. Okay, so you're clearing out the unhealthy part of the forest and you're letting it grow back healthy. Okay, so I'm not going to talk about every single one of these topics today because I don't have time, and I don't think you guys want to listen to 8 hours of me rambling on about it. But I'm going to talk about the few things that Amy asked me to speak about, okay? So the first thing we're going to talk about is sheep. And I promise I'm going to stop looking at this after I get through my sheep. I started to write down my presentation, and I'm going to read what I have written down to get me going, and then I'm just going to ad-lib, okay? So you're going to have to deal with me kind of wandering off here. All right, sheep are an amazing animal. They're an ancient source of sustenance and clothing. These animals have multiple purposes. They produce wool. Although there are some breeds that are called hair sheep, they don't produce wool. They don't need shearing. They just have like a normal hair, and you don't have to do anything with them, which is kind of nice. Although the sheep that we have on our farm are wool sheep, so we do have to shear them a couple times a year. We like to do that once in the fall and then once in the spring. The sheep also produce milk that you can make wonderful cheese from, and meat, if you've ever had lamb. Anybody ever eat lamb? Do you like it? Yeah. It's good stuff, yeah. I prefer it to beef. Okay, sheep are extremely hardy animals. They don't eat much. In fact, they can sustain life on just grazing on your grass or browsing for twigs and rose bushes and other things that people don't really like growing on their property. They are flock animals, and they do require having a buddy, or else they'll be kind of sad and lonely. And where one goes, they will all follow. And I do mean they will follow like right now. Sometimes they take you out at the knees when they're running past because they want to stick with their friends. At Anarchy Acres, we raise sheep for mainly two purposes. We sell them as breeding animals, and we do raise them for butcher. Lamb is incredibly nutritious. It's a high source of protein and an outstanding source of many vitamins, including iron, zinc, and B12. Regular consumption of lamb can promote muscle growth, and it prevents anemia as well. In many cases, lamb is superior to beef. Although it has many similar attributes, lamb has higher omega-3s and CLAs, which are beneficial for your cognitive, cardiovascular, and metabolic health. We have a small flock of sheep right now. We have 8, 2 rams, which are the males, and 6 ewes, which are the females. We are planning to grow our flock exponentially, and the way we raise them may change a little bit because we do only have 10.5 acres, and only half of that is clear. So we might have to alter our methods of raising them. But we really enjoy having the sheep. They're a really, really cool animal to have. And I do recommend sheep for somebody that's just getting into farming to have a couple sheep. They're fantastic animals. But this year we're expecting babies from 4 of our ewes, and 2 of them have already lambed, which was really, really fun. One had a single and one had twins. The ewe that delivered the single was a first-time mom, and she needed some assistance to deliver this baby. This is why farmers are more than just, you know, your overall wearing hillbillies out in the backwoods. We have to have some knowledge of a lot of different things. You have to be able to understand, you know, what you're feeding your animals. So you're like a nutritionist. You have to understand this animal is sick and I need to medicate it. And I'll be honest with you. You say call a veterinarian, which might actually work really, really great if you have a dog or a cat. You could just take it to the small animal vet, they're always in. But large animal vets are extremely difficult to come by. And while I have a fantastic large animal vet that's just right up the hill here, oftentimes they are pulled in so many different directions, it's extremely difficult to get them to come when you need them. It could be hours or days out. So it's really, really vitally important to have a really good working relationship with your vet. They can teach you a lot, and right now I'm able to pretty much provide my own veterinary care for our animals in their absence. So a lot of times, you know, like I said, being a farmer requires that you put on a lot of different hats, and one of them is being a doctor. I'm going to tell you a little bit about this sheep that delivered her baby. And while I'm not going to go into the nitty-gritty details, because nobody wants to hear that, I'm going to explain a little bit about, oh, you want to hear that? We'll save that story for another time. But she needed assistance with her baby, and the reason we knew she needed assistance was because we went down and we were watching her, and she was trying to push, and nothing was happening. We seen a little bit of a nose, and that was it. And this went on for a while, and she was really struggling. And so at that time, we knew we needed to help. And what happened was when baby animals are born, they're supposed to come nose and front feet first, and that helps them come. Well, this ewe was a bit small, and her baby had one front foot and one nose, and the other one was stuck back behind her pelvis, and it literally could not come out. And I knew that if we didn't do something soon, this sheep would die, and so would her baby. So after a lot of struggle, and again, I won't go into the details, I was able to deliver her lamb, who was 12 pounds, which is really big for a lamb, especially a first-time lamb. And we didn't lose either of them, which is a reality sometimes when you're farming. You know, you do have loss, especially when you do breed animals. Sometimes things don't go the way they're planned, and you have loss. But, you know, like I said about being a vet, you kind of have to understand what you're dealing with. And for days after that, we had to administer shots of steroids and antibiotics and monitor her temperature and make sure that the baby was eating okay, because she stopped eating. Mom stopped. Mom was in pain. Mom wasn't happy. She was looking kind of not great. But we got her through it, and so we have a beautiful baby from that. So that's one more thing that you guys should keep in mind about farmers. Like I said, we're not all overall wearing people. We do wear overalls, and we're quite dirty half the time, but we are much smarter than what might be perceived. The other lamb, just a couple days ago, or the other sheep, I went out and she had 2 twins. Beautiful. I didn't need to do anything. They were right there. We brought them in, put them under a heat lamp, and everybody is doing really, really well. So our sheep in the winter, they live in a covered outdoor area. So it just has a roof and no sides. That way they can get all the airflow, which is really important for their lungs and their respiratory system. They eat free choice hay, so they have a big round bale that they can pick at whenever they want it. And we do supplement our breeding animals with some grain, not a whole lot, but some, just to add minerals and vitamins that they might be missing from their forage. In the summer, we do rotational grazing, which means we move them every single day. And we divide them into 35 paddocks. The reason we do 35 paddocks is because we don't like to chemically deworm our animals. And a parasite's life cycle is 32 days. So if you move them every single day, in 32 days, that parasite's going to die without having a host to feed on. So we're naturally outliving the parasite life cycle, so they can't live long enough to infect our sheep and our cows. We do the same with our cows. And then we don't have to use any dewormers, which is really important to us. Because like I said, we are raising our animals for meat consumption. And that's just one more thing that you don't want added in. I'm trying to see. I know I just totally threw this out. We talked about the rotational grazing, and a lot of times what we will do is we will move our cows and run our sheep right behind them, because the sheep and the cows don't share the same parasites. What the cows might shed, the sheep won't pick up, and same goes vice versa. So it works out as a beautiful relationship. Also, the cows won't touch some of the brushy stuff that the sheep absolutely love. Another thing we like to do with our sheep in the summer is put them out into the woods. And I know I mentioned a little bit ago about the silvopastures. So what we like to do with our sheep is pasture them in the wooded areas, which is nice for them because it's cool. And they'll go about and they'll eat all that dense underbrush. You know, when you go out in the woods and you get stuck in the jagger bushes and it's really terrible, they'll eat all of that. And what they'll leave is maybe the twigs. They'll even eat the green parts of the twigs. So they're really, really good for removing the underbrush. And then we'll end up bringing our pigs in to that same area later to help clear, but I'll get to that in a bit. So the sheep are really, really great. Go down here. Now, there is one thing, and this will kind of lead into the goats. There is one thing that we do have to watch for when we put our sheep out into the woods. It's something called meningeal worm. This is a different kind of parasite than the ones I was just talking about out in the pasture. Okay? Meningeal worm is a parasite that will actually attach to the animal's spinal column, and it will completely make them paralyzed. Now this comes from eating a slug. So, you know, when they're out in the woods, they've eaten a slug that was infected by a deer. This again is what we talked about before about being your own veterinarian. You have to start treatment for that immediately, as soon as you see the first signs, because if not, you may not be able to get your animal to recover. We've lost a couple goats, unfortunately, due to that, so we've become very well versed in what to look for and how to treat. So sheep are awesome. They're entertaining. They're really funny. The rams can be a little cantankerous, a little ornery sometimes, but they're okay. I could talk about sheep pretty much all day because they're one of my favorite animals, but I want to ask you guys if you have any questions for me about sheep before we move on. Anybody have any questions? We try to use companion planting, which means bugs don't like this plant. Typically, it's normally a flower like nasturtiums. And if you plant those plants next to the plants that the bugs do like tomatoes or peppers, they'll tend to maybe not go to that plant because it's right next to a plant that offends them. Okay, so they're gonna go find something else. There's also kinds of plants that are called trap plants, and the bugs really love those plants. They love them so much that they'll just go to that plant. And when they go to that plant, there's something about that plant that will kill the bug. So we try to use different types of plants called trap plants and companion plants. Now, we, like I said, we use compost from our manure pile. So we try not to bring in an outside source of things because you can't always trust these outside sources. Last year, across the country, there was a big problem with people buying organic soils. They would bring them home, they would plant their plants just like always. But because there was such a demand last year, new gardeners were popping up left and right. There was such demand for these organic soils, companies had to turn them out fast. And so what was happening is they were getting grass clippings to put in their soil from places that maybe they didn't know, or manure from some place that maybe they didn't know. And those animals were eating something that was treated with pesticide, like a grain crop, or this grass clippings that they got had maybe been sprayed for weeds. And what was happening is they didn't break down long enough in those bagged soils, and they were killing people's plants. So that's one reason why we really like to have our own compost system. And it's easy to do at home for anybody that wants to start a garden. I encourage you to grow your own food, okay? Grow your own food. It's fun and it's rewarding. But you can start a compost pile in your backyard. You don't need animals, you don't need any of that stuff. Get leaves, get newspaper and cardboard, shred it up real small, put some water in there, go buy a straw bale somewhere that you can trust the source, put some straw in there, mix it up, and you'll get your own beautiful composted soil.
Okay, I've been really interested in starting a compost pile.
Yes.
It should be simple, right? Do you just find a spot and put it, or do you put it in something, or?
There's multiple ways to do it. You can put a compost pile in a container.
Okay.
But the way I like to do it is you build your pile, and this will get you compost much faster because you're going to aerate it. So you're going to start with layers like lasagna. Okay, you're going to put down straw, grass clippings. You're going to wet it down real good. More leaves, sticks. You want sticks in there too, small ones, not big logs. Oh, you could put them in the bottom if you wanted to. That's carbon. You can shred newspapers and cardboards, all different layers. And then you're going to wet it really, really well. And then you're going to let it sit for maybe a week. What you want it to do is build up heat. Okay? Then what you're going to do is you're going to go out and you're going to take your pitchfork and you're going to flip it over. Build the pile right next to it just by flipping it over. And that's going to create air that's going to help break it down because you need that air in there. And so basically what you're playing with is natural elements to help make it break down. So you just build your pile back up, wet it again real well, let it sit. Now some people will use a big long thermometer, and I believe you want it to get to 120 to 130 degrees interior temp. Don't quote me on that, look it up for yourself. But you do want it real hot, so it's steaming, you know, because that's what breaks it down. And then just keep flipping.
How long till it's ready to put on your?
If you do it like that, you'll have it in 60 days, which isn't, in the grand scheme of things, it's not really long. If you started it now, you'll have it by garden season. Yeah. Because we can't plant until, well, the Old Farmer's Almanac this year says that our last frost is April 27th. I don't believe that. I don't like to plant anything until, right, yeah, that's like a month ahead. Our weather's screwy. But yeah, so always, when you're planting.
That temperature, you want that temperature before you. How's it get that temperature now?
It will get that temperature, yeah. If I went home right now and I took a scoop out of my manure pile, it would just steam.
And chicken manure is good now?
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
chicken manure is fantastic. It's all nitrogen, which is what you really want.
We do just spread it on the garden, but we don't. Well, that's usually,
Right.
like, you put chicken manure straight on your plants, it's usually too strong.
Yeah,
But like you winter, yeah, you let it sit.
right. And there's some plants that do like nitrogen more than others. So some plants you can sprinkle it straight on and they're like, yes. And other plants you'll kill it. Yeah. Well, what we do with our chickens, this is kind of off topic, but I'm putting in a new garden bed this year because somebody decided their garden wasn't big enough. I mean, I only grew 150 tomato plants last year, but that wasn't enough room, so we're going big, we're going home this year. So I'm putting in a new garden bed, and what I do is, that's an old saying, what I like to do is I have chickens in chicken tractors. I do free range my birds, but I do keep some of them in chicken tractors so I can control finding their eggs, first of all, because I sell them in an egg CSA, and I do egg delivery every week in our town. But so sometimes it's hard to reach the amount of eggs that I need by finding the free range chickens' eggs. But it's also easy for me to control where their droppings go when I keep them in the chicken tractors. So I'll put my chicken tractors in my garden all winter long, and I'll just move them every day. And then I don't really love tilling. I prefer a no-till system, but when you're putting in a new garden bed, sometimes you have to till it in. You have to get the nutrition in, you have to loosen up the soil. You could do a lasagna garden, which is you start with cardboard and then you put all this other stuff on top, but it does usually take a couple seasons to really break down well enough that you're going to be able to grow anything very well. And I don't have a couple seasons. I have to have it right now. So back to the market garden. Last year, like I said, 170 tomato plants, 172 tomato plants, and 150 pepper plants is what I grew. And I don't have a greenhouse, like a big high tunnel greenhouse. Now we did get one, but it's not up, and that's going to be mostly for seed starting. And I am going to plant some stuff in ground in that high tunnel, just to extend my growing season so that I can get some cold weather crops a little bit longer. This year we're going to plant more things. I did do eggplants last year. I did broccoli, cauliflower, and cabbage.
How do you keep your bugs off the cabbage without your secret? Yeah.
Yes.
Those worms are like, yeah.
You want to go onto, it's a website that I like to call gurneys.com.
Oh, Gertie.
Yeah, Gurneys has a bug fabric. It's Agribon.
All the fabric.
It's Agribon. Now, if you have any used up fencing wire, or know somebody that might, I like to get a heavier gauge fencing wire and just make hoops out of that. You don't have to go buy expensive stuff. I'm your girl when it comes to as cheap as possible, or whatever you have laying around. Yeah, I love cheap stuff. I love free stuff. Go ahead.
What is your YouTube channel name?
It's Anarchy Acres Farmstead.
Okay.
Yeah. You want to follow along, feel free. I'm giving away 50 packs of seeds when I get to 500 subscribers. But anyway, so yeah, I just like to make a hoop out of fencing wire, and I just stretch it out, and I'll stake it in tight. You want to keep it tight.
You're encasing the whole thing.
Oh yeah.
I was gonna say, 'cause what's keeping them from going?
No, yeah, you take it straight down to the ground on all sides so that nothing's gonna get in there. And it works. It worked. I got broccoli, I got cauliflower, and the cabbage heads were beautiful. Now I do find, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask, what's the easiest thing to grow? So like if one of the kids maybe wants to start something this summer, what would be something
Super easy. You guys can grow lettuce, you can grow kale, and Swiss chard.
I'd say beans.
Beans are very easy also. Yeah, beans are very easy as well. And you just get tons of stuff. So you could start your own garden. You can grow green beans, and they come in fun colors too. Don't just think you got green and that's it. You can get yellow, you could get purple, you could get striped ones. It's crazy what you can find.
Tell a fun fact about beans.
Yeah, so you got green beans and yeah, what you got?
My grandparents had multiple different kinds of beans.
Yeah, they do all turn, well, aside from the yellow ones, they turn green when you eat them, huh?
What was that again?
Anarchy Acres Farmstead.
Okay, so we're talking about back to your broccoli and your
Yeah.
cabbage and you have that, are you putting that in no-till? What are you keeping your weeds down around that?
I put a weed block down.
Oh, okay.
Now, last year I spent a ton of money on weed block, and I am not thrilled with the performance. I still had weeds.
You mean like a fabric?
Yeah, and it was supposed to be like a 25-year fabric. It rips. If I touch it with my finger, it rips.
You're almost better off just to use newspaper.
Newspaper, cardboard, yeah. Yeah, so that's what I started doing is in the middle walkways, I put down wood chips, because my thought was, you know how you're supposed to, every 7 years, you're supposed to rotate your garden beds? So I was building my walkways with wood chips. And on top of that, I put grass clippings to try to keep the weeds down in my walkways because I didn't use the weed fabric. So in a few years, when I'm ready to rotate my beds, I could just literally move them to the walkways and turn my beds into walkways. So something to keep in mind, yeah. Wood chips, if you guys are wanting a garden, if you keep animals and you have a manure pile, get your local tree companies to drop you off wood chips. You can mix your wood chips in your manure pile. It helps break it down and turn it into compost.
Does sawdust work as well?
Sawdust will work. It doesn't have the carbon input that you really want with the bigger chips of wood. And usually the sawdust is kiln dried, whereas your wood chips are going to be more wet, so they're going to add a moisture content to that. But it will help. The wood chips you can use in your gardens as mulch. You can actually use wood chips as bedding for pigs. They love that stuff. There's deep bedding techniques that you can use. I would love to use deep bedding for my pigs. I can't because I don't have high enough overhead for my equipment to get in, and I'm not doing that by hand. I'm not. But you can use deep bedding where you would put in wood chips and sprinkle some corn, go in with wood chips, a little bit of hay, more corn, and just put it in there, and your pigs will root for that corn, and they'll turn over all those wood chips, and they'll break it down into dirt for you that way as well. We don't do that, like I said, only because I don't have the overhead clearance to be able to get a piece of equipment in there. And when it comes to cleaning stalls, I am a one-woman show. So I just can't do feet of bedding by myself. I can't do it. Won't do it. 4. They do help. She is probably my biggest helper. This is Harley, by the way. She is probably my biggest helper. She's with me at all times. And my 10-year-old son is my youngest. He's also usually with me. Stuff like this, he gets bored, antsy. I do homeschool as well, so these guys are all homeschooled. And then I have a 15-year-old, he'll be 16 here in a couple weeks, and I have an 18-year-old who will be 19 in a couple weeks. So he started his own landscaping company when he was 17. So something to look for. Yeah.
My uncle also started a landscaping company.
That's awesome.
And he's only 19.
That's great. It's a great business to start.
Wait, no.
I highly recommend. Being young entrepreneurs is important. And I know we're gonna wrap this up here. I only have a couple minutes left, but I really want to express this very clearly. Small farming is extremely important, okay? When I was young, I said I spent all that time with my grandfather. And that was in the 80s, and he told me, he said, don't ever get into farming to make money. Do it because you love it. That was around the time that the rise of the big industrial farm was coming, and many small farms were going out of business. They were going bankrupt. They lost their farms and their property. Small farming is expensive, and it is time consuming, and it is hard, and it is backbreaking, and it is sad at times. But it's also the most gratifying thing that you can ever do. I think that small farming is extremely important because I think that we take responsibility for feeding our communities, right? I feel very, very driven every morning when I wake up. I know I'm going out there to feed these animals that people in my community are going to benefit from. I'm growing a garden that people in my community are going to benefit from. And I know, and I can take peace of mind knowing that I'm giving them chemical-free food, something very healthy for them, right? I believe that the rise of the small farm is going to be vital for our country. I know that I'll get with you one second. These big industrial farms are very important because they sustain the average person, right? And you can't open up a farm in the middle of Pittsburgh. Like, that's not going to work out. But the small outlying communities, the small farmer needs to come back, and we need to support them. So if you guys find a farmer's market, if you see somebody that's selling a side of beef or a side of pig, tell your mom, tell your dad, check this out. We want to go see, you know, what we can do, because you're helping a small family, and I'll guarantee that that small farmer is going to be so thankful for your purchase, whether it's for a $2 head of lettuce or a $500 quarter of cow. Okay, that dollar is going to be spent back in your community again, right? And that's going to make a big difference for that family. So I think that we should all really try to support our small farmers, and yeah, that's all I got. So we're going to open it up to questions.